With Fox becoming the fourth official network upon its sign-on in 1986, a race for a potential fifth network quickly took form. The two competitors were Warner Brothers and Paramount, with their respective networks classifying themselves as the WB and UPN. From the announcement of the creation of both networks in 1993, all the way up until both of their closures in 2006, the WB and UPN were constantly battling it out. They both wanted to achieve the success that Fox had obtained just a few short years prior to both networks coming onto the scene. This special two-part episode of TV, Gone But Never Forgotten, will cover the rise and fall of both the WB and UPN. This final part will examine the other network in the battle for the fifth network, UPN. Warner Brothers and Paramount announced their plans to create their own networks only 7 days apart. Paramount struck first on October 26, 1993. Warner Brothers was close behind, going public with their news on November 2nd. The competition between the two networks had begun.
The United Paramount Network will launch on Monday, January 16, 1995. And I'm thrilled to be able to announce that as of today, we have achieved more than 65% coverage of the nation, with a total of 75 affiliates.
5 nights after the lukewarm reception to the WB's own launch on January 11, 1995, its competitor UPN signed on for the first time. The date was January 16, 1995, and UPN was about to soar to the top of the ratings with its inaugural program, Star Trek Voyager. Voyager was yet another installation of the wildly successful Star Trek franchise. Previous shows bearing the Star Trek name had gone on to see excellent ratings and a strong fan base. So it just made sense for a young UPN to kick off its first night of programming with the next chapter of the franchise. And so, when the numbers for Voyager came in following its premiere, UPN knew that they had a hit on their hands. 21 million viewers tuned in that first night. Those numbers were unbelievable for the brand new network. In fact, Voyager beat out the Big Four in ratings in certain markets. However, there wasn't much to celebrate. Voyager never got to reach those ratings again, instead finding itself with respectable ratings week after week. It was the most watched show on UPN at the time, but then again, one show alone couldn't hold a fledgling network together. On UPN's second night of programming, viewers were greeted with two dramas, Marker and The Watcher. Neither show performed well in the ratings, leading to both of their cancellations at the end of the season. UPN's third drama in its first season, Legend, was axed shortly after its mid-season debut. Its first attempts at comedies didn't do much better. Platypus Man, as well as Pigsty, didn't make it past their first seasons. UPN also launched a children's programming block shortly after it launched. On September 10, 1995, UPN Kids premiered, only a day after Kids WB made its own debut. The only difference between the two blocks was that UPN Kids aired on Sunday mornings rather than Saturday mornings, like Kids WB did. UPN Kids started out as a 1-hour block of cartoons, evolving into a 2-hour block in 1996. This 2-hour block ran until 1999, when it was replaced by Disney's 1-2, but more on that later. The first fall season for UPN showcased dramas instead of comedies, like its rival, the WB, was doing at the time. Nowhere Man was a science fiction thriller reminiscent of The Fugitive. Deadly Games revolved around a video game come to life, with its villains determined on destroying the real world. Live Shot featured a TV newsroom as the backdrop for its main action. The Sentinel was about a cop who had heightened senses after surviving in the Peruvian jungle for 18 months. Swift Justice was a typical police drama reminiscent of The Equalizer and Die Hard. Out of all the dramas to premiere during the 1995-96 fall season, the only one to make it past its first season was The Sentinel. Every other drama UPN put out was swiftly canceled. The bright spot for UPN during its first fall season, without a doubt, had to be Moesha. It was quite a surprise, considering the emphasis that UPN had put on its mainly unsuccessful dramas. All other attempts at comedies had been fruitless until Moesha debuted in early 1996. With the success of Moesha, which ran until 2001, UPN shifted its focus from dramas targeted to a predominantly male audience to sitcoms targeted to a predominantly African American audience. Other comedies like Moesha followed suit during the 1996-1997 season. UPN saved In the House, an NBC production, from cancellation. Malcolm and Eddie would run for 4 seasons. Good Behavior didn't share the same fate, getting axed after only 1 season. Sparks fared a little better, running for 2 seasons before its cancellation. Homeboys from Outer Space was a critical flop, and for good reason. According to this article from The Progressive, shown here, Homeboys from Outer Space, quote, is more like Star Trek meets Amos and Andy, unquote. Critics bashed the comedy for the ethnic stereotypes it portrayed being used for comedic purposes. Luckily, UPN put an end to it after 1 season, canning it entirely. The only drama to air during this time was The Burning Zone. It was essentially a ripoff of The X-Files, and when it inevitably tanked, the lead actors were removed mid-season. The Burning Zone, unsurprisingly, was critically panned, with the Chicago Tribune likening the show to a, quote, disease of the week TV movie, unquote, and Deseret News calling it, quote, a blatant attempt to build off of the success of The X-Files, unquote. UPN even used references to The X-Files as advertisements for The Burning Zone. It clearly didn't work, and The Burning Zone was canceled after 1 season. UPN still had the upper hand over the WB ratings-wise at this point. UPN had better station coverage compared to the WB. Viacom also purchased a 50% stake in UPN around this time. But it wouldn't be soon before long that the WB would overtake UPN in the ratings.
You can say that again. Where's the network, baby? Oh, UPN. UPN's new season is coming this fall.
While the WB was shifting its focus to teen-oriented dramas, UPN stayed consistent with its sitcom lineup. UPN picked up the television adaptation of Clueless in 1997. Good News, Hits, and Head Over Heels all bombed and were canceled after their first seasons. A revival of The Love Boat hit the airwaves in the spring of 1998, running for 2 seasons. The 1997-1998 season was arguably when things started to shift in the ratings between the 5th and 6th networks. The WB tied with UPN in the ratings for the first time since their sign-ons in 1995. UPN added programming to Thursday and Friday nights as a way to gain viewers, as well as incorporating a weekly sci-fi and thriller movie night into its lineup. As a way to bridge the gap between its 2 target demographics, the sitcom Guys Like Us was added to UPN's programming in 1998. DiResta followed suit, but neither made it past season 1. The third and final program to debut alongside Guys Like Us and DiResta was The Secret Life of Desmond Pfeiffer. And yes, that was how it was supposed to be pronounced. Even before it premiered on October 5th, 1998, the show's premise had already stirred up some controversy. Pfeiffer was set smack dab in the middle of the American Civil War. Its main character was a black English butler in the Lincoln-era White House. Activist groups protested Pfeiffer on the basis that it, quote, trivialized the history of slavery, unquote. These activists pushed for UPN to pull the show entirely, but they were unsuccessful in doing so. Pfeiffer premiered on October 5th, 1998, to the unsurprising negative reaction of viewers. 4 out of the 9 episodes scheduled to air actually did so, and Pfeiffer was quickly canned. Almost all of the dramas UPN premiered in the 1998-1999 season barely made it past a season, like Mercy Point and Legacy. But one that ran longer than that was 7 Days. It was another sci-fi offering for its majority male audience. It was also another show for critics to rip into. The overuse of violence was the main factor in their complaints, as in this article from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, shown here. The article calls 7 Days, quote, easily the goriest newcomer of the season, unquote. Still, 7 Days persisted, running for a total of 3 seasons from 1998 to 2001. Another promising offering for the 1998-1999 season came at the beginning of 1999 in the form of Dilbert. Based on the comic strip of the same name, Dilbert was a satirical outlook on the everyday workplace, in this case, The Office. The show had big names attached to the project, from executive producer to voice actors. Dilbert had nothing but raw potential when it debuted on January 25th, 1999. What happened? Well, Dilbert managed to pull in good numbers for its premiere, but after that, the numbers of viewers steadily decreased week after week. That didn't stop UPN from picking it up for a full second season, however. Dilbert barely made it through its second season, finding itself on top of the cancellation pile at the conclusion of its second season in 2000. UPN decided to tap into the wrestling market when SmackDown found its way into its programming lineup in August 1999. It was a bold move, considering that professional wrestling had traditionally been found on cable television rather than on the Big Six. It was also a necessary move for UPN to make, as without SmackDown, the network would have had to lose a night of programming, which could have seen the end of UPN as a whole if that had occurred. Luckily, it didn't, and SmackDown was a smash hit with the male audience. It became a staple of UPN, remaining with the network even through its merger with the WB in 2006, though it only stayed on its successor, the CW, for 2 additional seasons. SmackDown is still going strong and can be found on Fox today. UPN was thrilled with SmackDown's success, but that enthusiasm was overshadowed by the fear brought on by the Viacom-CBS merger on September 7th, 1999. With CBS now in Viacom's possession, would Viacom still want another television network? Viacom finally had full ownership of UPN after Chris Kraft, who had owned UPN since it launched in 1995, had its share bought out by Viacom. UPN could easily be shut down now. But would it?
UPN. It's time for you, baby.
The Viacom-CBS merger might have taken place by now, but that didn't stop UPN from maintaining its status as a contender for the 5th network. Among all of its duds for the 1999-2000 season, The Parkers stood out as viable. A spin-off of the aforementioned Moesha, The Parkers would go on to run for 5 seasons. It became a staple of UPN's Monday night lineup before ending its run 5 years later in 2004. Remember UPN, kids? In 1999, Disney's 1-2 replaced the block. It was a continuation of ABC's Disney's One Saturday Morning block, making its debut on September 6, 1999, just a day after UPN Kids quietly signed off. UPN ran the children's block until August 31st, 2003, partly because of the rebranding of the ABC block from One Saturday Morning to ABC Kids, effectively rendering the 1-2 branding useless. After the block's cancellation, UPN went without programming targeted towards children until its merger with the WB in 2006, making it the only Big Six network without a children's block. The 2000-2001 season featured 9 new shows for UPN. Out of those 9, only 3 would see at least one additional season. The Hughleys, a sitcom that started out on ABC, was picked up by UPN for 2 more seasons. Special Unit 2, a mid-season replacement, saw another season. But it was Girlfriends that really caught viewers' eyes. Girlfriends might possibly be the longest-running program out of UPN's lineup, if not one of the more memorable ones. Airing on Monday nights for 6 seasons on UPN, Girlfriends was one of the few shows to make the jump to the CW after UPN's merger with the WB in 2006. Girlfriends aired for 2 more seasons on the CW, ending in 2008 without a proper series finale due to the 2007-2008 Writers Guild of America strike. UPN finally got a win over the WB in 2001 when they acquired Buffy the Vampire Slayer from its competitor, the WB. To recap, negotiations between the WB and 20th Century Fox Television, who had been producing Buffy, had grown hostile pretty quickly at the start of 2001. A very public war had begun between the two over licensing fees for Buffy. 20th Century Fox Television wanted to raise the price to $2 million an episode, but the WB wanted to keep things where they were at almost $1 million an episode. The WB believed that more money would be made in syndication and spin-offs. And so, even after the WB offered $1.8 million per episode, executives at 20th Century Fox Television struck a deal with UPN to carry Buffy for 2 more seasons at a price of $2.33 million per episode. Buffy had officially moved networks. The WB had lost one of its biggest shows. Even worse, Buffy's spin-off, Angel, still had 1 more season left in its contract for the WB. The shows had been separated. Buffy officially made its UPN debut on October 2nd, 2001. 7.7 million viewers tuned into the 6th season premiere. It would see another season, its last, the following fall. Was the Buffy move to UPN the right one to make? At first glance, yes. It seemed to bring in the viewers that UPN desperately needed. UPN hadn't really tapped into the young adult market the way that the WB had, so picking up Buffy was a smart move on UPN's part. In the long run, however, maybe Buffy's move to UPN wasn't good at all. The Buffy fandom has been very vocal about their distaste for Season 6 in the 20 years since the show moved networks. Either way, no matter how you feel about it, the Buffy situation did end up benefiting UPN. Another show made the jump from the WB to UPN in 2001. Roswell had been canceled after its 2nd season, and so UPN scooped it right up. Though it aired directly after the ever-so-popular Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Roswell couldn't keep the audience tuned in. It was canceled for a final time after its 3rd season, ending on May 14, 2002. A revival of Roswell premiered nearly 20 years after its original debut on January 15, 2019, on UPN's successor, the CW, and is still airing as of this video. UPN went back to its roots with another iteration of the Star Trek franchise in 2001. Voyager was going off of the airwaves after 7 seasons, so it just made sense for a new Star Trek program to fill its spot. Star Trek Enterprise was that show. Enterprise was a prequel to the original Star Trek series, taking place 100 years before the events of the original series. It would go on to be the last Star Trek iteration to air on UPN, as well as the last iteration to air until the 2009 reimagining of the franchise. An early cancellation for Enterprise in 2005 shocked its fanbase. It had only been on the air for 4 seasons at the time of its cancellation. These fans rallied together to try to bring a continuation to the series, but it was to no avail. Enterprise was officially brought to an end on May 13, 2005. Half and Half became one of the most watched shows on UPN, second only to Girlfriends, over its 4-season run on UPN. It was yet another sitcom, this time revolving around estranged half-sisters reconnecting. Half and Half was so popular that it was the 4th most watched program on the network. It was even considered in the list to make the jump to the CW in 2006, though Half and Half ended up being left off of the final lineup when the CW launched in September 2006. Half and Half ran from September 23, 2002 to May 15, 2006. In 2003, UPN rebranded, dropping the familiar circle, triangle, and square in favor of a simple circle for the logo. It was a way to breathe new life into the network, so to speak. This rebranding can be compared to the WB's rebranding in 2005 when their beloved frog croaked. Was this a good idea? In theory, yes. Many of the shows towards the end of UPN's run were successful, but UPN still wasn't considered elite enough to become the 5th network. Yet. America's Next Top Model is one of the most iconic competition shows to ever air on American television. The show aired 6 seasons on UPN and was one of the 6 shows chosen to be carried over to the CW in 2006. It aired 16 more seasons on the CW before the cable network VH1 picked it up for an additional 2 more seasons. America's Next Top Model premiered on May 20th, 2003 on UPN and ended on April 10th, 2018 on VH1. Eve was a sitcom starring the said rapper. The project started out as an attempt to replicate the success of another UPN show, Moesha. Eve came out of that desire for success. Was it successful? Signs point either way. On one hand, the show did run for a total of 3 seasons, but on the other, critics have mixed opinions on the content of the show. Either way, Eve ran all the way up until UPN's closure, getting shuttered along with the network in 2006. Eve premiered on September 15, 2003, ending on May 11, 2006. All of Us had the makings of a great sitcom, but it just had bad timing. The show was created by one of the most recognizable Hollywood couples, Jada Pinkett Smith and her husband Will. All of Us was about a blended family, much like the Smiths' own family. The show managed to run for 3 seasons on UPN before its merger with the WB, making the difficult switch to the CW for its 4th and final season. All of Us dropped in the ratings after moving to the CW, ending in its cancellation in 2007. Veronica Mars was another attempt for UPN to get into the teen demographic. The show was a mystery drama reminiscent of the Nancy Drew book series, premiering in 2004. The first 2 seasons followed a case of the week format with a season-long mystery arc overlapping. The 3rd season, however, followed a different format. This format consisted of 2 smaller mystery arcs, with the last 5 episodes of the season focusing on standalone mysteries. In 2007, it was revealed that Veronica Mars would not be returning for a fourth season, to the dismay of its fans. Flash forward to 2013, when a Kickstarter fundraiser from series creator Rob Thomas and lead actress Kristen Bell was made in hopes of getting a film adaptation made to continue the series. It worked, raising more than $5 million, and the film came out the following March. Additionally, the streaming service Hulu brought Veronica Mars back for a fourth season in 2019. The original series ran from September 22, 2004 to May 22, 2007, with the film coming out on March 14, 2014. The fourth season of Veronica Mars was released on July 19, 2019. Everybody Hates Chris was a sitcom revolving around comedian Chris Rock's teenage years. Rock even provided narration for the sitcom. Everybody Hates Chris was a hit with critics right out of the gate. The sitcom also beat out NBC's Joey and Fox's The O.C. in the ratings to sit high and mighty in second place for the 8 p.m. time slot the night of its premiere on September 22, 2005. Everybody Hates Chris made a successful transition to the CW in 2006, running for 3 more seasons before ending in 2009. UPN had a rougher time on air than its main competitor, the WB, during its time on air. Its many mistakes outweighed its few successes, and on top of that, the network had many internal struggles with its various owners as time went on. But now, in 2005, the WB was the one having a rough time, while UPN was gaining strength. Something was about to happen, something that would change the face of television forever. On January 24, 2006, an announcement would be made that would shock the television industry. In a sudden turn of events, Warner Brothers and CBS announced that the WB and UPN would be merged into one unified network, the CW, later that year. UPN shows that would make the move alongside the merger included All of Us, America's Next Top Model, Everybody Hates Chris, Girlfriends, Veronica Mars, and WWE SmackDown. And so, the fifth network had finally hit the airwaves. After 11 years of battle, the WB and UPN both conceded, being laid to rest quietly. Their child, the CW, would fare somewhat better, staying on air to this day. UPN didn't have the same bittersweet ending that the WB had. There was no night of favorites and farewells. Instead, UPN quietly signed off on September 15, 2006 after SmackDown. This could be in part due to Fox-owned UPN stations ending their UPN connection on August 31st. Those stations would already have been tuned into My Network TV on September 15th. This could be why UPN didn't get to have an emotional goodbye. Some say UPN probably should have shut its doors for good long before the merger with the WB. Others believe that UPN was just misunderstood. Either way, the facts are blatantly clear. UPN was never able to find one single audience to cater to, as seen with their urban comedies, their sci-fi thrillers, and, towards the end of their lifespan, teen dramas. Throw in a rowdy young male audience with SmackDown, and there's everyone. UPN also couldn't find lasting shows that stuck with audiences. The majority of shows covered in this video never made it past a single season. That doesn't mean that UPN didn't have shows that added to its legacy. Voyager and Enterprise are beloved by the Star Trek fandom everywhere. Moesha, its spin-off The Parkers, and Girlfriends still hold up as comedies. SmackDown still lives today on Fox. Buffy and Roswell are cult classics now. And, most importantly, America's Next Top Model ran 12 years after UPN signed off for good. That in and of itself is something to be proud of. Thanks for watching this episode of TV, Gone But Never Forgotten. Next time on M-Story, we're covering the next installation of the long-forgotten art of the American soap opera, followed by a look into some defunct cable channels.